All right, let's get back to our current guest, our good friend Steve. Steve, again, thank you so much for taking time out of your evening. I know it's a little bit later there on the East Coast and being here with us tonight.
Oh, happy to be here, Pat. Thanks.
We were talking Robin Williams again before the news break, and again, such a tragic tragedy. What I really enjoyed about him was just the diverseness that man had. An unbelievable stand-up comic. I mean, a mind that was running at 1,000 miles an hour, and then such great films, Good Will Hunting. So many that he did that you would never figure him to fit in those kind of roles.
Well, one of the most amazing things to me was his work as a dramatic actor. He's always described as, a comic, a comedian, a comedic actor. His funny stuff is, always cited. Mrs. Doubtfire, Good Morning Vietnam, all that stuff where he's totally on. But you just named one of the most incredible performances in Good Will Hunting, Awakenings, where he played Dr. Oliver Sacks, who just passed away. As a dramatic actor, he was extraordinary. And I often wonder if his dramatic work has somehow kind of taken a back seat among fans and popular culture and the media, because, when he was in a dramatic role, it was just devastating. And I think it speaks to what you were saying earlier about how he is. He was a down-to-earth guy. He could talk to anybody. He truly understood the human condition. He manifested empathy and compassion all the time. Even when he did, I have all of his stand-up shows, and they are, I wrote about him in the Robin Williams book, too. And even when he's trashing people, it's done with a heart. He was truly a fully developed, gifted human who caught a bad break. And that Lewy body syndrome thing, it's heartbreaking. You know what it reminds me of, and this is kind of a really weird comparison, but Joan Rivers.
Yeah.
Because of a fluke during an operation, we lost her. Because Robin wasn't diagnosed with something that would ultimately make him decide to end his life, we lost him.
Right.
In my classes, I teach, the Carpe Diem philosophy, seize the day. And in fact, Robin was in Seize the Day on Broadway, the Saul Bellow, the play adaptation of the novel. And, I tell my students, 18 years old, I tell them, you guys are eternal. With technology and modern medicine, you guys got, another 80 years ahead of you, hopefully.
Right.
But just remember, yesterday's gone, tomorrow's not guaranteed, all we have is today. Mm-hmm. So even though you think you're going to live forever, which I hope you do, just always remember, to seize the moment. And Robin was just one of those people who could make us appreciate life. I mean, that was, even when his interviews, when he did Comic Relief with Whoopi Goldberg and what's his name? I can't remember
Billy
his
Crystal?
name. Billy Crystal, thank you. Billy Crystal and Whoopi and Robin did Comic Relief. I mean, they improvised, they did skits and so forth, but there was a heart visible with Robin at all times. Yeah. You could see his heart in everything he said, everything he did, even when making jokes. Yeah. There was a tinge of, not even a tinge, it was an overwhelming feeling of humanity to him. And I loved him. I mean, his work and just the personality, the person he was. It's infuriating. Yeah, that's how he went out. It truly is.
Another actor comedian that you may I don't know if you'll agree or disagree, but I think is totally different, very similar to Robin Williams. And it was interesting that you mentioned Comic Relief because he did appear there one time. Is Don Rickles?
Oh, sure. Sure.
Don is he's what, 90 years old. He's still doing his show in Vegas. People say that when you go see that show, it's absolutely unbelievable. And not a bad bone in the guy's body. Just absolutely loves people, loves to be alive, loves to be able to do what he's doing. I remember watching one of them where he came out and kind of tore them all up, and just an amazing type of guy, a person that has come a long way, and just truly has a heart at the end of the day.
He was interviewed on Inside Comedy, the David Steinberg show that's on Showtime. Steinberg did half-hour interviews, sit-down interviews with all the great comedians. He started with Larry David, and he moved through them all. And Steinberg is incredibly loved and respected in Hollywood, so they all sat for him. Big, big names, Bob Newhart, And Don Rickles' interview, he threw a few, you're a hockey puck insults at Steinberg, but he made a point. He says, David, I just have to say this. He says, yes, I'm an insult comic, but I'm never mean-spirited.
Right, exactly.
He said, never. He said, yeah, I play with people. He says, but nobody ever cries. Nobody goes home feeling hurt. They're laughing. He said, and I made a decision from the minute I started my career. I wasn't going to hurt people. And I think that speaks to what you're talking about, and it speaks to Robin, that multi-level. There are comics who just get up and they got the same old shtick and they do their bit, and that's what they're known for, and fine, they have a career. But then there are the deeper people and the ones who are true artists. And Don is in that bunch. Larry David is in that bunch. And Robin was definitely in that group. And again, this is why it's infuriating as to how he went out.
Yeah, it was again just a great actor, a great human being that went too soon. Your book about Breaking Bad, a little bit. If we could switch over to those,
Sure.
to some of your new stuff, I'd like to kind of get into. That show. I got to be honest with you. I watched it on Netflix. I didn't have cable. I watched the first episode or two. I wasn't all that impressed. I kind of couldn't see what people were getting into. And then it was 2-3 episodes in, and man, the hook was set. You just couldn't. You just couldn't get enough of it.
Well, I think a big part of it is that the writing is extraordinary. But more importantly, and this actually goes back to my very, very first book, which was Mayberry, My Hometown, and it was an encyclopedic look at the Andy Griffith Show. And when I did interviews about that, I made the point that the humor in that show came from the characters, not jokes. In Breaking Bad, the drama comes from these most fully realized and fully fleshed out and beautifully depicted characters. The way they wrote the personalities of each of these characters, every single viewer believed they knew them. I mean, there are forums online where people they posit a question, how would Skylar react to this? Some hypothetical. And her personality is so well written and so well defined, Skylar White, that we know how she'd respond. That's not easy to do, to create characters out of whole cloth and make them so alive, and to maintain that for 5 seasons and have a dramatic story arc that begins in the first episode on his birthday, his 50th birthday, and ends 5 seasons later, 2 years in TV time, on his 52nd birthday.
Right.
It's breathtaking, absolutely breathtaking. In fact, I got a book coming out this year called 635 Things I Learned from The Sopranos. And yeah, it's fun, a lot of fun.
We got to talk about that too.
Okay. And I have my TV list. Every writer has their top 10 favorite albums, favorite songs, favorite books, favorite TV shows, favorite movies, blah, blah, blah. And I've always had The Sopranos at number 1. always.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the greatest TV drama in the history of television.
I agree with you.
But now, Pat, I'm hedging. When people ask me, I actually say, I think it's a tie between The Sopranos and Breaking Bad, because if The Sopranos didn't exist, Breaking Bad would be number one unquestionably. If Breaking Bad didn't exist, The Sopranos would be. You get what I'm saying,
Right.
And if Sopranos didn't exist, Breaking Bad would be number one. If Breaking Bad didn't exist, Sopranos would be number one. So I'm now saying it's a tie, because they are both such examples of television dramatic excellence that I can't live with saying Breaking Bad is number two. So it's number one for me. And that's why. I mean, it's just become, you know what it is? It's amazing. Vince Gilligan created a show that during its run became iconic.
Right.
It happened with All in the Family. It happened with Mad Men a little bit. It happened with MASH, although not in the later seasons. But the point is, for a TV show to be catapulted to that level of cultural awareness, and for other shows to be judged by those standards, Vince Gilligan is an absolute genius. And for him to come up with this, and you know the story, he came up with this story from a New York Times article. He read an article about a guy who was traveling around the South cooking meth in an RV. All of the backstory about Walter being a teacher and getting diagnosed with lung cancer and all that, those were dramatic devices that had to be added to provide the arc that carried us through all the seasons. But
Right.
the story was about this guy who got caught. And Vince read it, and he called one of his co-producers or co-writers, and he said, that would be an interesting show, don't you think? And his friend, his partner, said, I don't know, man. I mean, that's dark. A guy drug manufacturing, in this day and age, and in an RV, and Vince Gilligan said, well, let me take a swing at the pilot. And there you go. That was it. These characters sprang to life, and before you know it, it ended up becoming a cult hit after like the first season, and primarily because of Netflix.
Right.
On air, its ratings weren't that great.
Right.
But then people start, word of mouth. They say that's the best advertising, right? We've all heard that, right? And people kept saying, have you seen Breaking Bad? Well, no, I heard about it. Oh, you got to see it. Matter of fact, you know what that happened with? House.
Yeah.
The first season of House, people were...
I couldn't stand that show and then fell in love with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I have all 8 seasons. I
Yeah.
rewatch them all the time. In fact, there's an episode called, 2 episodes, Half-Wit, which guest starred Dave Matthews, and Fetal Position, which guest starred the guys from the All-American Rejects. And they both pose moral questions. I actually use them in school as prompts for argumentative essays because the writing is so sophisticated that there are these nuances of morality questioning going on throughout both episodes. And the students have to say, would I do this? Would I do that?
Right.
So Breaking Bad, it's one of my all-time favorite shows. I believe it deserves every bit of the acclaim that it receives. I've written for this website, whatculture.com. It's a British pop culture website. And I did a piece on examples of outrageous behavior on Breaking Bad that did not involve murder or cooking meth. And it was kind of a humor column. But then another writer, and I'm pretty sure it was that site, did a whole chapter on what's wrong with Breaking Bad. Examples of bad writing, bad episode. And the fan reaction was so hostile because they were such nitpicking little far-fetched things that, it wasn't anything that fans could swallow. I mean, criticism is one thing. Nitpicking, for the sake of being, controversial is another. So, the bottom line is that the show is, if it's not an A plus, which I think it is, it's a hard A. Yeah. I mean, it's A plus in grading today is 97 to 100. I'd say it's 97, 98. Maybe there might be a little something here and there that could have been done a little better. You still got to give it the 96.
Sure. No, you do. You do. Well, and it's interesting that, like, those three, and those are three of my favorite programs. When you think about The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, and House, talk about all bad things. I mean, House, we find out as it goes on and on and on, he's a drug addict,
Totally.
And really a messed up individual that just gets some breaks here and there, But again, what great story. Again, Breaking Bad, when I first started watching it, and I didn't see any of the series. Was it on Showtime? I never saw any of it on Showtime. I strictly saw it on Netflix.
Well, it was on AMC.
Or AMC, rather.
AMC,
where I was able to just go ahead and not have commercials and just go episode to episode.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you, with the last episode of Breaking Bad, now I have heard Bryan Cranston in just some different interviews kind of mention a few times, how do we know Walter's really dead? Do you think it's over with?
He's teasing.
Yeah.
He's teasing. Every single interview Vince gave after the series ended, Walter is dead. There will be no sixth season. The next incarnation of Breaking Bad is Better Call Saul, which is now in production for its second season. Saul Goodman is the carryover from Breaking Bad. The characters from Breaking Bad will probably appear in cameos because it takes place 8 years prior to the events of Breaking Bad, so everyone's alive, including Gus Fring and Mike and everybody. But no, there is no. I know one of one of Brian's most remarked upon quotes was, "Well, we didn't see any body bag. We didn't see anybody take him away," But no, he's dead. Walter White died on his 52nd birthday in the makeshift lab that the neo-Nazis built. And there's a couple of things in there at the very final moments of the episode when he looks into the reflection of the tank. He looks like the old Walter from the beginning of the series. And when his bloody hand slides down the tank, it forms a W.
Interesting.
Yeah. Vince Gilligan is a master of detail. And so now, and you know what I always consider a criteria for excellence? Is the show worth studying? Because if it is, then you've experienced and you're witnessing real art. The Sopranos is an 86-chapter novel for television. So is House. So is Breaking Bad. So's the first 3 seasons of ER. Mm-hmm. By the way, I have a book on ER coming out this year as well. And I think personally that what you were just mentioning about Walter and House and their characters, we witnessed over the last several years the rise of the anti-hero on TV, because we've got Walter White, definite anti-hero, Tony Soprano, Dexter, Al Swearingen in Deadwood, the guy in The Shield, Mike Chiklis, who played the cop in The Shield.
Oh, another great show.
Dennis, what's his name, in Rescue Me?
Yeah.
These are all anti-heroes. Matter of fact, anyone listening, go to my website. I wrote a lengthy article about 8 notable TV anti-heroes, and House is one of them. And this is something TV heroes, TV stars, I should say, centerpieces of a TV drama, could never do anything that would make the audience not like them. Now, it's the exact opposite. And, in fact, in the first season of The Sopranos, the episode College, it was episode 5. Tony takes Meadow on a tour of New England colleges, mm-hmm. and he sees this guy who flipped on the crew many years ago and was now in witness protection. He had changed his name, but he recognized him, and Tony had to execute him. And do you know that HBO didn't want to air the episode?
Really?
They said, you can't have the main character kill somebody. It's just fans aren't going to like him anymore. We can't. And David Chase said, are you kidding me? That's exactly what he would do. Always, and here is another genius, David Chase, being true to the character. The character should dictate the story, not the needs or wants or desires or what the network thinks the audience will accept. No. You tell the story, you paint the picture of that character truly and accurately, and the audience will come around. And that's exactly what happened for all those shows that I was talking about, Rescue Me and The Shield and Dexter and Deadwood and House and Sopranos and even Mad Men. What's his name? The main character. I can't remember his name in the show.
That's one show I never got into.
Me neither. I have the first season, and I've watched it, but I never got into it. And you know what's funny is that it's written by one of the writers for The Sopranos. So I thought, and you know what else? Boardwalk Empire. That was written by Terrence Winter, who is one of the writers for The Sopranos. And I thought I would love it, and I never got into that either. So I don't know. Maybe it was... I'm only comfortable with them writing in my zone, which is Tony.
Again, another one of those shows you just, what do you think about the last episode? Do you think everybody died, they got gunned down, or do you think that was the magic of it? Just go to dark and
You're talking about The Sopranos?
Yeah, let the viewers, let their
Tony
imagination...
Soprano is alive. Tony Soprano is alive, and I have proof.
Okay.
And actually, I posted this on my website like 4 years ago. And I don't know if anyone would agree with me, but here's the situation. A very famous basketball player, I honestly don't remember his name, but you would know him. The Knicks wanted him. And James Gandolfini and Edie Falco made a short film saying, you need to... It wasn't Shaq. It was some really high-profile basketball player. I'm sure the listeners know who I'm talking about. They made a short film, and in it, they played Tony Soprano, Carmela Soprano, and the storyline was that they were inviting this basketball player to come to New York. We have a spot for you. You'll love it. Tony had a beard, and he was in witness protection. Now, there's no way they could have made that short film, which, by the way, never aired except for the player and the team, okay? It's never been shown on the Internet or anywhere else, but I've heard many people who saw it talk about it. And the storyline is that Tony comes out of witness protection with his wife to talk this basketball player into signing with the Knicks. There's no way they could have done that using the characters and actually making pronouncements about the characters' behaviors without David Chase signing off on it. Therefore, to me, that's evidence that when the show ended, Tony went into witness protection, and I consider it like a little kind of like addendum to the show's storyline because, again, it was named, the characters were Tony Soprano and Edie Falco played his wife in the show and Carmela, and he said where he was. So to me, and I when I'm really into a TV show, I like to live in the universe of the show or consider it within the universe of the show. So if David Chase tells me in a short film that Tony Soprano is alive and in witness protection, that's good enough for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of a shame. Same thing. It's kind of a shame. Kind of a shame to see James pass away at such an early age.
Oh, what a horror! That was terrible, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Young. That's the thing. He was so young, and it's just terribly sad. What he could have done If he had lived, actually, okay, it was LeBron.
Okay, LeBron James.
Yeah, that the Knicks wanted LeBron, and David Chase approved a short film starring Tony and Carmela Soprano. And to me, that contributes to the universe of the show. So, but I'm sure, it was supposed to be a lighthearted pitch, and but still, the character is alive in this pitch. Well, after the scene at Holston's, so I I made the leap and said, no, okay, he's alive,
and we'll leave it at that. Yeah, great. So, is your book? Is it going to just detail? Is it going to bring out kind of like a lot of your other ones, Steve? Is it going to bring out all the little details that people want to know about?
Well, no. It's more humor. The theme is things I learned from The Sopranos. So, like number 28, okay, in the chapter. Let me see here what chapter I'm in. The arts, okay. Number 28 is that Quasimodo is the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. I learned that in the show, and then what I do is I explain that Tony has to explain to Bobby Bacala the difference between Quasimodo and Nostradamus, because Bobby thought that Quasimodo predicted the World Trade Center attack and the trouble in the Middle East, and Tony corrects him that it was Nostradamus, and then Bobby goes off on this rant about how the hunchback of Notre Dame and the quarterback and fullback of Notre Dame, and Tony gets incredibly irritated and goes off his diet. So, what I did was I pinpointed some really interesting and funny scenes that I learned, and then wrote about what they were talking about, and many, many of them are pretty funny.
Yeah. Wow. That's going to be a good one. I just love that show. Show that I'm getting into now, that I'm having a hard time in production. Just the new season just started. I'm getting into this Blue Bloods. I
never saw it.
Yeah, I never thought I would like it until I started watching it on Netflix, and it's same thing. Although it moves a little bit slow through time, but it's been a good program. A big fan.
Cop show, right?
Yeah, about family.
Yeah. Excellent. I still rewatch the show. It's again the writing. There's a book out about Chase and a couple of other really major directors, writers, and they talk about the writers' room. Mm-hmm. And the emphasis, and what really kind of struck a chord was that, excuse me, the writer's room for these really, really big, important shows are like combat. Mm-hmm. Every writer, like Aaron Sorkin wrote every episode of first 4 seasons of The West Wing, every episode of Sports Night, every episode of Studio 60, every episode of Newsroom, but he had a writer's room and a staff of writers, and that process where everybody throws out ideas and everything gets shot down until ultimately they end up with a story that the main writer goes off and writes. With Breaking Bad, there were 7 or 8 of them, and they would rotate. And they never knew which episode they'd be getting. It would be up to Vince. But they would all collaborate on the main plot lines of the show and the storylines and where each character, what was going to happen to each one of them. There were usually 3 basic stories, the A story, B story, C story. And with Sopranos, it was the same way, except that Chase was just really, really meticulous about always, going back to what we were talking about earlier, always being true to the character. And to me, that is just something, even Stephen King does that. There are the characters in his novels, Jack Torrance in The Shining and Greg Stilson and Johnny Smith in The Dead Zone, and the nurse in Misery, and I mean, they are so well crafted that, once again, part of the thing with King's appeal is that these characters just spring to life. And fiction has plot, character, setting, dialogue, and like Kevin Smith, he admitted he focuses like 90% on his dialogue.
Right, right.
And this is why he's often criticized for weird story developments and so forth, because that just, those elements of story writing just don't interest him. But he's often hired as a script doctor to improve dialogue. With King and Chase and Gilligan, and these are character writers, character creators. They make these people. And in fact, one of the greatest essays I've ever read was by Aaron Sorkin, and it was in the New York Times, and Barack Obama visits President Bartlett. After President Bartlett from the West Wing had left the White House, Barack Obama, real person, President Bartlett, fictional person, Barack Obama visits President Bartlett and discusses the election with him. And I said, to me, that encompassed the whole, like, in another universe approach to fiction. Because now he had by then he was a candidate. At that point he was a candidate. Candidate Barack Obama knock on the door of President Bartlett's New Hampshire farm door, and then they had this big discussion, and it was in the New York Times. Pat, that to me was heaven. It was just that kind of crossover between reality and fiction, and yet we knew President Bartlett. Whenever you say President Bartlett, any West Wing fan sees Martin Sheen in their head, So yeah, the character writing true characters. If you look at any of the major successes, particularly in TV, you'll find that they had fully drawn characters. Any shows where any character's lines could be said by any other character and it would have the same effect, those usually fall by the wayside. But shows where like in The West Wing, for example, something that C.J. Craig says, played by Allison Janney, could never come out of the mouth of Toby. This. That's the kind of character-driven writing that I find incredibly appealing and are often, marks of the success of a show.
Yeah. Well, again, an amazing Sopranos just being an amazing program. Again, they're icons in history. I mean, you can sit down and you can watch them, and they take on a life of their own. Speaking of Breaking Bad, one of my favorite episodes, and when I first watched it, I thought, well, this is kind of stupid. I can't think of the episode name, but the one where it starts out where the drug lord's got him down underneath the cleaners in that room where they're making, where they're cooking.
The super lab.
The super lab. And it starts out with a fly on the wall.
That's called Fly.
Yeah.
That's one of their bottle episodes. Every TV show has to have a bottle episode that doesn't use guest stars and only uses one set, and it's all budgetary. But that one is that episode, Pat. That's the most argued about Breaking Bad episode in the history of the show.
Really?
You love it or you hate it?
I love it.
You do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was, at first I didn't, but then when I watched it again, and then I watched it again, and, even like with my wife a couple times, Carol has said, this winter, why don't we just watch it all over again? I'm like, it happened, but it's one of those. There's a few movies like that, for me at least, and I think a lot of people agree. Movies like Armageddon with Bruce Willis, you can watch that 100 times.
I've seen Goodfellas 75 times.
Right, Casino. That's
right.
Yeah, that's the problem. My kid, my son, who's 27, a couple of months ago, on a Sunday, he came over and he goes, I went over to the grocery store and they had Goodfellas, Casino, and one of the other films. on sale, you know, in the bin for $4. You got all three movies, and he threw Goodfellas in, and you know, farewell. We'll work around the house. What do? We ended up wasting a whole Sunday in the summertime from about 9:30 in the morning until 8 o'clock at night.
Absolutely, and it was worth every minute because
Yep.
it's irresistible. It's absolute, and in fact, have you heard about Scorsese's latest project? I Heard You Paint Houses.
Oh, that's
Yeah, the mob guy story.
yeah. Matter of fact, gosh, I can't think of his name. I actually had the author. Now, wait a minute. Is that the Jimmy Hoffa story?
No, it's not Hoffa. It's the Bulger.
Yeah,
Lady-
I had him. I've had him on my program before.
Wow, wow, and you know this is going to have Pacino, De Niro, and Pesci.
Really?
Can you imagine that movie? What that's going to be? I mean, De Niro and Pacino only appeared together once in that movie, Fatal something or whatever. It wasn't that great.
No, actually, that is about The Last Day. That is about Jimmy Hoffa.
I Hear You Paint Houses. Is
Yeah,
about
Charles
Hoffa?
Brandt. Charles Brandt.
Oh, okay.
You can listen to the interview I had with Charles. Real nice guy. He lives he lives up in Idaho now, and he was a police officer or an FBI agent at the time.
And is the movie based on his book, I Hear You Paint Houses?
That's what I heard.
Wow. That is going to be an incredible movie.
Yeah, but Charles Brandt wrote the book I Heard You Paint Houses, and I had him on the show. It took quite a bit to get him on, but I had him on the show about a year ago, I think.
No kidding.
Really interesting.
Wow. Well, yeah, I mean, to get De Niro, Pacino, and Pesci in one movie, and it's a mob movie,
yeah,
it's just, you can count on it.
Well, the other movie I'm looking forward to, a Scorsese film that he's going to do with DiCaprio, is on H.H. Holmes on
Serial Murderer.
Right.
right. The guy who had the horror house.
Right. Well, yeah. What's H.H. Holmes? They think what's the famous Jack the Ripper?
Right.
Matter of fact, I had a guy who claims to be the great-grandson of H.H. Holmes, and I need to touch base with him again. They were looking to basically what he had said, a very interesting 2-hour interview I had with him, talked about his book, and they were waiting to get permission from the government to dig up a body and do forensic DNA testing to prove whether his great-grandfather was truly H.H. Holmes or not.
Really?
But I hadn't heard where it gone. But yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, the Charles Brandt interview was really well, and again that was all about Jimmy Hoffa and Frank the Irishman, Sheeran, and real interesting.
I am very looking forward to that. The performances they're already Oscar nominated. I mean, they're not, but of course you know what I mean. Those three guys together. And, you know, again, De Niro and Pesci, you know, they've worked together. But to get Al Pacino in there,
yeah,
what a trio.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be something. Well, any of those Scorsese films, no matter how bad they are, they're still good.
Yeah, I'm a big Scorsese fan. I always have been. In fact, I've been working on a Scorsese book for 20 years, and it's never gone anywhere. I could never get a handle on how I wanted to write it. I've always found myself writing almost 90% about the films. And to go back to what we were talking about at the beginning of our evening, I focus on the work, but I knew that commercially there'd have to be biographical content. And I know Scorsese's had an interesting life, and he grew up, he was an altar boy, and he's got, you know, religion issues and so forth, but it's just not something that piques me to the point where, you know, I want to put a lot of time into it. So I ended up writing massive reviews of Taxi Driver and The Last Temptation of Christ and all of these, you know, big film-based essays and articles, and it's sitting here. Maybe I'll do something with it at some point, but I'm a big fan. I love Scorsese. Yeah.
One thing I found pretty interesting, I saw an interview with him. I don't remember who the interviewer was, but they asked him about the music composition. Scorsese doesn't hire an orchestra. He takes all, hit clips and things that we've grown up with our whole life, and incorporates that into all his movies. He
Oh,
doesn't.
sure.
And I was and the whoever was doing the interview, which I thought was so interesting, he said, "Well," they said to him, "Well, don't you have to go around and get all the legality stuff and all this other stuff?" And he says, "No." He said, "I sit down, I figure what we're going to put in there, I write the owners of it, and say, look, we're going to promote the heck out of your music and our film. End of story."
Yeah, and then they have a department that
Right.
just gets the rights, pays whatever it's going to cost. The Stones have probably made a fortune.
Oh, probably.
From, I mean, in The Departed, right? I mean,
Oh,
that
yeah.
soundtrack is awesome. So yeah, he never uses written music. He always uses pre-recorded songs, which is excellent. It really gives his films a particular flavor, a tone, a sensibility that that sometimes is lacking in movies where you get these big orchestral swelling at the dramatic parts, and the piccolo when it's a funny scene, and not him. He puts in a song. He uses Pink Floyd and the Who and the Stones, and so yeah, it's he's one of my favorite directors. Him, Woody Allen, Kubrick, Quentin Tarantino, huge Tarantino fan. So.
Heard there's some talk about a Kill Bill 3.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. That he has an idea, that he's open to it. I don't know. I mean, Bill's dead.
Yeah.
Where do we go from there?
Well,
right?
and he's really dead.
Yeah, he's really dead. She did the 5-point
Right.
exploding palm technique on him. And,
she did.
And so,
and Carradine really did die kind of strange in a closet with a rope around his neck.
So there's no Bill. The bride is still alive at the end of the film.
Right.
Beatrix. But, where do we go from there? You can't, if you call it Kill Bill 3, who's Bill?
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to see how he's going to come up with this. But that's how it has been referenced of late in mentions by him and in interviews and stuff. Kill Bill 3. Yeah. And I just can't see story-wise how that's a legitimate future title, because, once you can't bring the character back. The only thing that might be possible, prequel.
Yeah.
You tell the story of the bride and Bill that wasn't told, part of the story that wasn't told in the two films, and, then you can have everybody in it,
Well, they can do anything they want, Steve. It's Hollywood. I mean, look, we're going to sit through, and I got to be honest, you may laugh at me, we're going to see one more Rocky movie here in another month, which actually looks like an interesting concept of what they're doing.
Yeah, you're right. They can do anything. Bring people back, and right.
Well, I've got to wrap it up, my friend. It was such an honor to have you here as always, and I want to thank you for staying up late and giving me some of your Saturday night. And it's just always fun to talk with you and get such great emails and reviews the next day. And I wish you the best. And the holidays coming, and let's keep in touch and get you back on again after the first of the year. See where you are with things.
Absolutely, Pat. And my best to you and your family and all my friends at the station.
All right, my friend. Take care. Be safe. God bless. And keep on writing. You keep us all entertained. Okay.
I will.
Good night, Steve. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.